Hello, and thank you for joining me on another weekly episode. This is finally harvest time for the worms, and I'm starting with a quick review of how I make my bedding when I do my harvesting. I basically just shred cardboard. I did invest in a cardboard shredder, and I shred up cardboard, make sure the cardboard gets soaked and moistened really well before adding any other material to it. Once I am happy with the amount of moisture in the cardboard, I do add in cocoa coir. I use the bedding with just cardboard and cocoa coir now. I used to add additional things to that. If you'd like to see what I used to add, just look at the card above and click on it to watch some previous videos. There are a lot of different ways that you can add the bedding, but my base is cardboard and cocoa coir. On top of that, I add in some of the worm grit that I add on a normal basis, mix it up very well again, and that is all that I put into making the bedding. I'm probably going to have to do this a couple times. I just didn't want to make a big batch at once because I find that I'll get dry spots like this. So I'll just add some water to this and mix it in. And since I'm doing 3 bins, I'm not going to do 4 because I just didn't want too much material. Throughout the harvesting process, I was checking the level of the finished castings just to make sure that it did not go above that line or ridging that you see in this bin, because I didn't want it to be filled to the top and then be too heavy or overflow, because you are going to move half of it over when you do the horizontal migration. So I'm just moving all the finished castings over, and the good news is there isn't any liquid at the bottom of my bin. As you can see, everything inside the castings was a very good consistency. Still kind of heavy, so they're going to dry out during the harvest period, but I just put some bedding and you can see the difference. The bedding on the left is brown and this is more of a deep brown blackish color. So that's kind of how you know as your castings get to the finished stage, just on feel and color. I'm gonna put the food in the middle of the castings and put my grit over and then put some more castings on. So this bin is super filled, and the other regular tote is also going to end up being super filled. And hopefully I'll have as much success as I had last time with these bins migrating. It only took me about 2 to 3 weeks to do it. So that's pretty much what I do for the regular totes for the horizontal migration. And I'm going to jump over to the next bin and do the same thing. So with this bin, I noticed that I did have more bigger bits in here, like seeds and plastic. So we'll see how much material I actually end up with. But I'm just moving it all over to the side once again. But I found a worm ball here. So instead of moving that over into the finished castings and waiting for the worms, I'm going to just add them to the regular castings right underneath the level of the food. Just like the other bin, I'm going to give it a nice feeding, put the grit and cover it up, and then they're all set for the next week. We'll see how long it takes for that, but again, you can see the big difference between new bedding and finished castings. Doing a little bit something different with the regular tote. Now the regular tote needs some repairs. I would have tried a migration in this, but I found 2 holes in the bag. So I'm just going to do the bait method with this one. So with baiting, I make sure that the bin that I'm putting the castings in and the bin that the castings are coming from all have the same number. So I have 4 of these white bins, and that's how I make sure if I'm doing multiple at once, all the worms get back into the same spot. Just like with one of my totes, I found a good amount of worms, so I'm not going to let them stay here. I'm just going to put them in the in the Vermi Bag tote so that I don't have to worry about any missing worms. My bait tray, I have a soldering gun that I use to make the holes, and there aren't any holes at the bottom so that the worms can come back out. And I tend to fill the bait tray up to the capacity so that the worms are enticed to come out of those castings and go in. And with my pre-made bedding on top, this will finish up the bait tray for the week. And unlike the last time where I made the mistake of putting the mosquito netting, I'm going to put bubble wrap to keep the moisture in so it doesn't dry out. When you're doing your harvest, it's also the perfect time to check your Vermi bag. Make sure that it's fit onto the bin tightly, it's not loose or sagging or touching the bottom. So I'm just detaching this bag from the tote itself and readjusting the straps, checking to see if I lost any worms underneath. Happy to report I didn't lose any worms at all. It was just some material that had come over the sides, probably when I was adding material before. So I'm just adding it to the pre-made bedding that I had there, and then reestablishing it and putting the worms into the bin after that. Now with this bin, when I put the bedding back into it, I don't normally feed my bin when I do the bait because there aren't any worms, but this time I am feeding it because I did find that big worm ball this time. So that's a little bit different than previous times, and just like with all my other bins, it gets a feeding, a smaller one, because I will be adding a lot of the food from the bait tray in, so I don't want too much food to accumulate. But give it a small feeding and it's all set. Last tote bin is my second Vermi bag tote, where I am focusing on increasing the colony. Now there was a large piece of food still left, so I just put a small bit of food in there and covered this up because I didn't feel like I needed to do anything. There was still a lot of grit left in the bin. And lastly, moving over to the Vermi bag mini. This I put to the side for harvest. I wasn't ready to do that with having just done the 3 bins, and I just wanted to give myself a little bit of space. So when I checked this bin, I did find a lot of pieces of food from the previous week, and it was dry. So I mistakenly put the grit in first. You really don't want to put the grit in before the water. You want to put it in after. But I put my grit in, watered it down because the edges were a bit crispy, and didn't add any food to this. Again, want to encourage the worms to come up. And that completes the video for today. Thank you so much for sticking with me to the end. As always, please like and subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.